चढ़ती कला टाइम टीवी नॉर्थ अमेरिका देख रहे सारे दर्शकों का वर्ल्ड पंजाबी न्यूज़ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਦਮ। ਖਬਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਮਾਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਖਾਸ ਹੈਡਲਾਈਨਸ ਤੇ। ਭਾਰਤੀ ਵਿਦੇਸ਼ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਐਸ ਜੈ ਸ਼ੰਕਰ ਨੇ ਦੋਹਾ 'ਚ ਕਤਰ ਦੇ ਵਿਦੇਸ਼ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਨਾਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ। ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਤੇ ਕੀਤੀ ਚਰਚਾ। ਕਾਬੁਲ ਤੋਂ ਭਾਰਤੀ ਹਵਾਈ ਫੌਜ ਦੇ ਜਹਾਜ਼ C-130J ਨੇ ਭਰੀ ਉਡਾਨ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ ਵਾਪਸ ਆ ਰਹੇ 85 ਭਾਰਤੀ। इंग्लैंड च फौज द्वारा की जा रही एंबूलेंस सेवावां की सहायता NHS स्टाफ के नाल मिलकर काम कर रही है फौज। ते हुण खबरां विस्तार नाल। भारतीय विदेश मंत्री एस जयशंकर ने बीते दिन कतर के अपने हमरुतबा शेख मोहम्मद बिन अब्दुल रहमान अल थानी के नाल अफगानिस्तान की स्थिति से गलबात की। अमरीका दौरे तो परतदे हुए दोहां ने अपने पड़ाव विच गलबात की। कतर की राजधानी दोहा विच अफगान शांति गलबात आयोजित की जा रही है। शांति प्रक्रिया को अगे बढ़ाने में खाड़ी देश कतर की महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका है। जयशंकर ने ट्वीट कर जानकारी दी कि दोहा में रुकन दौरान कतर के विदेश मंत्री नाल अफगानिस्तान को लैके लाभदायक चर्चा हुई। अफगानिस्तान हुण तालिबान के कब्जे च है। तालिबान के कब्जे मगरों उत्थे फसे भारतीयों को कड्ढण लई भारतीय हवाई फौज लगातार जुटी हुई है। काबुल हवाई अड्डे की सुरक्षा अमरीकी फौजियों के हाथों च है, जिसकी मदद नाल भारत भी अपने नागरिकों को एयरलिफ्ट करके वतन वापस लिया रहा है। विदेश मंत्री एस जयशंकर ने हाल ही अमरीकी विदेश मंत्री एंटनी ब्लिंकन नाल सहयोग की अपील की थी। अज भारतीय हवाई फौज का C-130J जहाज ने अफगानिस्तान की राजधानी काबुल तो 85 भारतीयों को लै उड़ान भरी है। इंग्लैंड च एंबूलेंस सेवावां नूं सुचारू ढंग नाल चलाउण ते ज्यादा लोकां लई पहुंच योग बनाउण लई फौज की सहायता लई जा रही है। इसलिए इंग्लैंड च 4 एंबूलेंस ट्रस्टां दी मरीजां की देखभाल च सहायता लई फौज के लगभग 100 मैंबरों को लिया गया। एंबूलेंस की ज्यादा मांग ते स्टाफ की घाट कारण सैनिकों की वरतों NHS स्टाफ के नाल काम करने लई की जा रही है। इंग्लैंड के साउथ सेंट्रल, साउथ वैस्ट, नॉर्थ ईस्ट ते ईस्ट खेत्रों च एंबूलेंस सेवावां नूं फौज द्वारा सहायता दी जा रही है। फैडरल चोणां दे ऐलान तो बाद हुण NDP पार्टी वालों भी चोण प्रचार जोर शोर नाल कीता जा रहा है ते पार्टी प्रधान सरदार जगमीत सिंह अज एडमिंटन पहुंचे हुए सी, जिन्हां ने कनेडा के सब तो अहम मन्ने जांदे मुद्दे यानी कि हैल्थ केयर उत्ते वधेरे जोर दिंदे इस विच सुधार करन दे लई कई अहम योजनावां सांझियां कीतियां।
Heather and Blake, and we are here with healthcare workers and nurses. These are frontline healthcare heroes, and we know that here in Alberta it's been very difficult for people and very difficult for healthcare workers. We're seeing cut after cut that is driving healthcare workers out of the province. We are seeing people that are worried if they're not going to be able to get the care that they need. These cuts at the provincial level are only made worse because for years and years, federal governments have been cutting healthcare as well. The Conservatives cut healthcare, and then Trudeau kept in those same cuts. Those cuts at the federal level from Justin Trudeau and those cuts from Jason Kenney are making it so it's so difficult for these workers. And just to remind folks, these are the workers that were our front line of defense in this horrible and difficult time. These are workers that have been burnt out, working hour after hour to keep us safe. These are the workers that are vaccinating us, keeping us healthy. These are workers that are working in hospitals, in critical care. These are the workers that we trust our lives with, and they simply don't have the resources to do their job because governments are cutting the care they need. It does not have to be this way. New Democrats are committed to investing in our public health care, to supporting our healthcare workers, and ultimately making sure people have the care they need. In this election, you have a choice. Justin Trudeau, who has continued to show that he cuts healthcare, is not there for workers, and under his being a prime minister, healthcare workers are leaving this province. Or you can vote for New Democrats. You can vote for Heather or Blake and New Democrats across this province who are committed to fighting for you and your families to make sure healthcare is funded, and so that when you or your loved ones ever need help, healthcare is there for you. People are there for you. We can make this happen, and that's what the choice is in this election. And we are committed to investing in healthcare urgently. We are committed in expanding it. We believe in defending our public healthcare so that people have the care they need. I want to add one additional point. I know that Justin Trudeau is making an announcement on long-term care. I find that really troubling because he, when given a chance to vote for removing profit out of long-term care, when we know that profit in long-term care directly resulted in some of the horrific conditions we saw our loved ones and seniors were dealing with, he voted against getting rid of profit in long-term care, making it clear he'd rather protect the interests of those for-profit, billion-dollar large corporations that make profit off the backs of seniors rather than putting seniors first.
ਵਿਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਸਪਰ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਸਮਾਜ ਸੇਵੀ ਕਾਰਕੁਨ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਉਹ ਮੌਂਟਰੀਅਲ ਨਾਰਥ ਦੇ ਮੇਅਰ ਲਈ ਚੋਣ ਲੜ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਵਾਦਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਸ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਨੇ। ਇਲਜ਼ਾਮ ਇਹ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ 22 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੌਕਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਅਸਤੀਫਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਈ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਇਲਜ਼ਾਮਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਸੇ ਸੀ। ਇਹਨਾਂ तमाम ਸਵਾਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਅੱਜ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਸਪਸ਼ਟੀਕਰਨ ਵੀ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ।
Did a mistake 22 years ago. Yes, I confiscated a computer without permission. It's a huge mistake. It's something that I should have been way better, and I should have thought even more about that. I never crossed the line. I never gave or handed out any information to anybody. It's against my principle, of course. I think I have proven through my 22 years of professional work and personal work that this is part of my values. I'm not perfect, and I have some. I'm not perfect, but one thing that people know over here, especially, is that I don't lie. When I was a police officer and when I work as a community organizer, I just had one mission: to bring the youth out of criminality.
I think it's important to look at the man, Will Prosper, as a whole and everything he's been doing. And I really want Montreal to ask himself, how long does it take before people, forgive us for something we did apologize for?
I think that dignity is in order here and legitimacy is in order here. So I truly believe that Mr. Prosper shouldn't be a candidate. But the current mayor, choose to protect their activists instead of protect Montrealers.
ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੀ ਕਾਰਗੁਜ਼ਾਰੀ ਉੱਤੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਸਵਾਲ ਖੜੇ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਮੰਗ ਉੱਠ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਰਿਫਾਰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ। ਇਸ ਉੱਤੇ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਦੇ ਮੇਅਰ ਜੌਨ ਟੋਰੀ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੀ ਚੌਥੀ ਲਹਿਰ ਨਾਲ ਲੜਨ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੀ ਤਿਆਰੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕੀਤਾ।
Well, I think the parts that were done were things that could be done more quickly. For example, huge increases in transparency in the budget so that people will see line by line how the police spend their money. You mentioned the mobile crisis intervention teams to expand dramatically the coverage that those teams have, which are teams that include a nurse and a police officer or a trained medical person to help deal with mental health and distress calls is a big accomplishment. The things that take longer are, for example, the establishment of a completely alternate way to answer calls from people in distress. So it's not the police that are answering, it's trained mental health professionals, and we're working on that and introducing a pilot project on that in January, but it takes time to get the people to decide how and where and when you're going to do it and so on. And so we're working at, I think, pretty good speed to get those things done. And I will say this: I am very committed to these reforms happening. It is going to take time to restore trust in policing and to try to do things differently. And in the meantime, I think that the police are doing a good job to keep the city safe, which is their task that they have, a very big task in front of them, and that we're working through this list. I think, to me, after a year, 36 out of 81 things that are completed is not bad. We can always do better, and we're working hard to make sure we get this done as quickly as we can. Well, I think that we have to establish the principle that people absolutely must be vaccinated and not pose a risk either to their fellow employees or to the other people they come in contact with, whether that's students or whether that's the public in other ways, or even just their co-workers or their neighbors. And I think that all of the things that have been put forward represent a good start. I think that the proof of vaccine issue shouldn't be a big issue. I mean, the federal government has said they're going to come forward with something digital, and I hope that can be done in such a way as to make it a universally used thing that can be for all purposes. You can get proof of vaccination from the province. I don't even understand really what the big debate is about here. I mean, we just have to take account of the fact that in this case, it is more than about me. Me meaning any individual person. It is about us. It's about the collective good. It's about keeping people healthy. It's about, frankly, keeping the economy open and avoiding the consequences of a surge or a fourth wave that we see happening in the United States to children, for example. I mean, heaven knows we've got to protect our children and keep the schools open, which are scheduled to open in just a couple of weeks' time.
ਫੈਡਰਲ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਵਾਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਝੜੀ ਲਗਾਈ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਲਿਬਰਲ ਆਗੂ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਤਈਆ ਪ੍ਰਗਟਾਇਆ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਹੱਥ ਮੁੜ ਸੱਤਾ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਨਵਰਜ਼ਨ ਥੈਰੇਪੀ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਬਿੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਮੁੱਖ ਤਰਜੀਹ ਬਣਾਉਣਗੇ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੱਸ ਪਾਏ ਕਿ ਨਵੀਂ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਜਲਦੀ ਲਿਬਰਲ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਇਸ ਬਿੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰ ਸਕੇਗੀ।
I can confirm that Canadian Armed Forces assets and personnel have arrived on the ground to coordinate at the tactical level with the U.S. and with our allied partners. This will help get Canadians, Afghan nationals, and their families to safety. 2 Canadian Armed Forces C-17s will be making regular flights into Kabul to support evacuation efforts. Yesterday, alongside Ministers Mosef, Sajjan, and Mendocino, I met virtually with members of the Afghan Canadian community. The images we've seen out of Kabul over the last few days have been heartbreaking. I told the community we would do whatever it takes to support the people of Afghanistan. We will continue our efforts at evacuations, and I know that Canadians from coast to coast to coast will step up to support Afghans, to support resettlement, welcoming people who will build better lives, not just for themselves, but for all of us here in Canada. My friends, it is so good to be here in BC with Mayor Haynes of Saanich and our outstanding Liberal team. I'm also very happy to be joined by Sherry Moore-Arthur, our next Liberal MP for Saanich Gulf Islands right here. And a big shout out to Nikki MacDonald, our candidate for Victoria, and to Doug Kobayashi, our candidate for Esquimalt Saanich Sooke. Sherry, Nikki, and Doug, I know how amazingly passionate you all are about the environment and about protecting a better future for our kids, about arts and culture, about helping small businesses, and most of all, about the people here on the island. You will be strong voices for your communities and for all Canadians. It is so good to have you on the team. I also want to say what a pleasure it is to be back here for some personal reasons as well. Many years ago, I was here to visit my grandmother, Kathleen Sinclair, who stayed in this residence. And from the conversations I just had with the seniors and residents here, it's still an extraordinary place to care for seniors. This is a part of the country I know very well. I always talk about my BC roots. Well, they are particularly poignant right here because I have my 2 aunts, Betsy, 2 of my aunts, Betsy and Heather.
उधर कंजरवेटिव आगू एरिन ओटूल भी जस्टिन ट्रूडो तो किते पिछे नहीं ने। ओटूल ने हाउसिंग संकट खत्म करन ते 3 सालां विच 1 मिलियन घर बनाउण दा वादा कीता। अपनी चोण मुहिम नूं अगे वधाउंदे ओटूल ने कहा कि घरां दी सप्लाई जिन्हां विच किराए दे घर भी शामिल ने, उन्हां ने कहा कि देश दी तेजी नाल वध रही आबादी नाल मेल नहीं खा रही, जिस नाल हाउसिंग संकट खड़ा हो गया है।
Colombia, that criminals are using Canada's housing market to stash the proceeds of crime. All of this throws up barriers to young families looking for more space for their kids, people who have found a good job and want to buy their first home, and retired empty nesters trying to downsize, none of whom can find the home they need. Canada's recovery plan will build more homes for Canadians and stop foreign money from pushing prices out of reach. First, we will implement our plan to kickstart the building of 1 million homes in the next 3 years. The Government of Canada is the largest landowner in the country. Much of the land the government owns could be developed for housing. We will release at least 15% of the buildings that belong to the federal government to build more homes. The Government of Canada also spends billions of dollars every year building transit. It's time to focus on transit-oriented development, ensuring that we build homes and increase density near transit. Our plan will provide more Canadians with a path to home ownership by making it easier for more families to get a mortgage. To do so, we will develop a new market in 7 to 10-year mortgage terms to provide stability both for first-time homebuyers and lenders. And we'll make improvements to the mortgage stress test and mortgage insurance rules to help Canadians afford homes. To stop foreign investors from sitting on empty homes and to get the proceeds of crime out of our housing market, we will ban foreign investors from purchasing homes here if they don't intend to live in or move to Canada. If people around the world want to invest in our great country, and I want that, we will instead encourage them to invest in purpose-built rental housing to provide more affordable options to Canadians. We'll provide incentives to get more rental housing built, and we will create a federal beneficial ownership registry for residential property and strengthen our laws to root out money laundering. Finally, Canada's Conservatives will never tax the capital gains on the sale of your principal home, something we know that the Liberals have been laying the groundwork to do. Pour empêcher les investisseurs étrangers de monopoliser les logements vides,
ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਆਰਮਡ ਫੋਰਸਿਸ ਨੇ ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ ਲਈ ਉਡਾਨਾਂ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਐਲਾਨ ਕੀਤਾ। ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ CAF ਦੀ ਸੰਪਤੀ ਤੇ ਕਰਮਚਾਰੀ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਸਹਿਯੋਗੀ ਭਾਈਵਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਣਨੀਤਿਕ ਪੱਧਰ ਤੇ ਤਾਲਮੇਲ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਅਫਗਾਨਿਸਤਾਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਨੇ, ਜਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਅਫਗਾਨੀਆਂ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਮਿਲ ਸਕੇਗੀ।
And with our allied partners. This will help get Canadians, Afghan nationals and their families to safety. 2 Canadian Armed Forces C-17s will be making regular flights into Kabul to support evacuation efforts. Yesterday, alongside Ministers Mosef, Sajjan and Mendocino, I met virtually with members of the Afghan Canadian community. The images we've seen out of Kabul over the last few days have been heartbreaking. I told the community we would do whatever it takes to support the people of Afghanistan. We will continue our efforts at evacuations, and I know the Canadians, the coast to coast to coast, will step up to support Afghans, to support resettlement, welcoming people who will build better lives, not just for themselves, but for all of us here in Canada. The difficulty right now is the safety of personnel and the security of planes flying in and out, and that's why over the past few days there have been far fewer flights than people had hoped. But now that the airport is back under American and international control, we are able to fly in regularly with Canadian military aircraft to ensure airlift of people out there. The limit, however, is not on Canadian capacity, on Canadian space and airlift. The limit on getting people out is the fact that the Taliban continue to block access for Afghans wishing to flee the country. We are going to be there with aircraft, with spaces on aircraft to bring people to safety. But unless the Taliban shift their posture significantly, which is something the international community and Canada are working on, it is going to be very, very difficult to get many people out. We will get some, certainly. But to get many people out, as many as we want, is going to be almost impossible in the coming weeks. But that's why we will continue to work with partners in the region, work in ways to try and get as many people out as quickly as possible from this terrible situation.
According to eyewitness reports who are on the ground in Kabul this morning, the Taliban is not stopping the exodus of people leaving. They're not getting in the way today, but people do not have Canadian visas, and that's what's holding this up. Why isn't the government getting people that are on their list onto planes, finishing the biometrics and paperwork later? And also the British and French allies, they have specific military teams who are on the ground in Kabul, getting people from safe houses to the airport and onto planes. Is Canada doing that, and if not, why not?
Yes, Canada has personnel on the ground now, and we'll have more personnel arriving later today.
ਸਿਆਸੀ ਜੰਗ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਗੰਦਲੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ, ਪਰ ਪੋਲਿੰਗ ਸਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਾਫ਼ ਰਹਿਣਗੇ। ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੋਲਿੰਗ ਸਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਸਾਫ਼ ਸੁਥਰੇ ਰਹਿਣਗੇ। ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨਜ਼ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈਲਥ ਐਂਡ ਸੇਫਟੀ ਮਾਪਦੰਡ ਜਾਰੀ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ। ਇਹ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਉਦੋਂ ਹੋਣ ਜਾ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੇ ਤੇਜ਼ੀ ਨਾਲ ਟਰਾਂਸਮਿਟ ਹੋਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਡੈਲਟਾ ਵੇਰੀਐਂਟ ਦੇ ਮਾਮਲਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਤੇਜ਼ੀ ਨਾਲ ਵੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਧਾ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ।
Mr. Perot was right. This will be a little bit of a different election compared to past events. But what Canadians will be seeing at the polls is very similar to what they've been seeing at other locations across the country when they go grocery shopping, when they go to the drugstore. So all of our workers will be wearing masks. Masking will be mandatory for all poll workers, all Election Canada workers. You will see hand sanitizers available at the polls. Physical distancing will be in place at the polls. We will have masks. I'm sure you've seen the stats of how we've ordered millions and millions of masks. So we will have masks on hand for any elector who may have forgotten their mask and would like one. Plexiglass barriers to protect in between our poll workers and electors. You might be voting in a different location from where you voted in the past as well, and that's because our returning officers are trying to find locations that will allow for more physical distancing between electors and between poll workers. When you go up, that last person who does your check strikes your name from the list before they hand you your ballot to go vote. Normally you go up to the table, there's two people sitting there. This time there'll be one person sitting there. So these are some of the things that voters can expect to see. And those are all there to make the experience as safe as possible for voters and also for our poll workers. For voters, but if someone cannot wear a mask, we certainly encourage them to explore other ways to vote. There's a variety of ways you can vote by mail. You can vote request a mail-in ballot, for example, and then you don't need to worry about wearing a mask or not in a polling location. That would be one example. But certainly from what we've seen, with other provincial elections, with our own federal by-elections that happened in the Toronto area, right in the middle of Wave 2 back in the fall, is that the vast majority of electors do comply with the masking regulations. But we are always in communication.
ओंटारियो ਦੇ ਐਮਪੀਪੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਲਗਵਾਏ ਜਾਣ ਤੋਂ ਇਨਕਾਰ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰੈਸਿਵ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਕਾਕਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਕੱਢ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਲੈਮਿੰਗਟਨ ਤੋਂ ਐਮਪੀਪੀ ਰਿਕ ਨਿਕੋਲਸ ਨੇ ਦੁਪਹਿਰ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਈਨਜ਼ ਪਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਐਲਾਨ ਕੀਤਾ। ਨਿਕੋਲਸ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਤਨੀ ਨੇ ਨਿੱਜੀ ਕਾਰਨਾਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਨਾ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਚੋਣ ਕੀਤੀ। ਇਸ ਐਲਾਨ ਤੋਂ 1 ਘੰਟੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਨਿਕੋਲਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਕਸ ਤੋਂ ਕੱਢ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਨਿਕੋਲਸ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਐਲਾਨ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ ਤੋਂ 2 ਦਿਨ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਡਗ ਫੋਰਡ ਦੇ ਆਫਿਸ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ओंटारियो ਦੀ पीसी पार्टी ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਮੈਂਬਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਵਾਉਣੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕੱਢ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਨਿਕੋਲਸ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਐਮਪੀਜ਼ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਸਨ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਵਾਈ। ਸਕਾਰਬੋ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਤੋਂ ਐਮਪੀਪੀ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਟੀਨਾ ਮਾਈਟਸ ਨੇ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਨਾ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਕਾਰਨ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਸਬੂਤ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਇਸ ਲਈ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਉਸ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਕੋਈ ਕਾਰਵਾਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ। टीटीसी ਵਿੱਚ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਵਰਕਰਜ਼ ਸਮੇਤ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਮਿਊਨਿਸਪਲ ਇੰਪਲੋਈਜ਼ ਨੂੰ 30 ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਤੱਕ ਮੁਕੰਮਲ ਟੀਕਾਕਰਨ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਉਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਮੁਲਾਜ਼ਮਾਂ ਨੂੰ 13 ਸਤੰਬਰ ਤੱਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਖਿਲਾਫ ਆਪਣਾ ਟੀਕਾਕਰਨ ਕਰਵਾਇਆ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਨਹੀਂ। ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਟੀਕਾਕਰਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਟੀਕਾਕਰਨ ਨਾ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਲਿਆ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਫਾਇਦਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਸਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿੱਖਿਅਤ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਹਾਸਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਮੁਲਾਜ਼ਮਾਂ ਲਈ ਲਾਜ਼ਮੀ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਸਿਟੀ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਮੁਲਾਜ਼ਮਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੈਕਸੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਵਾਈ ਹੋਈ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ 30 ਸਤੰਬਰ ਤੱਕ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਡੋਜ਼ ਦਾ ਸਬੂਤ ਦੇਣਾ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਹੈਲਥ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਮਨਜ਼ੂਰਸ਼ੁਦਾ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਵੈਕਸੀਨ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਮੁਕੰਮਲ ਟੀਕਾਕਰਨ ਕਰਵਾ ਕੇ ਅਜਿਹੇ ਮੁਲਾਜ਼ਮਾਂ ਨੂੰ 30 ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਤੱਕ ਸਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਵਰਲਡ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਬੁਲੇਟਿਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ। ਹੋਰ ਤਾਜ਼ਾ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਲਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਟੀਵੀ ਨਾਰਥ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਰਿਦਮ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਆਗਿਆ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।